say when. I've got a job interview, and I'm waiting for a call back.
Okay. Well, maybe Rick can fill in for you if you have to go.
Well, I'll do my best. It's doesn't always the chat messages don't always show up for me, but I'll mention it to you if I see one.
Babaji, I hope that I was off topic from where you wanted me to go when I was discussing the logos in Greek thought, especially in Christian Greek thought. But I'm unclear what we're to understand that is distinct about the perspective that you're representing from the one that I was trying to describe, namely that the creation process is accomplished in and through the Word, and that conservative Christians relate to that historically as unpersonal or in personal terms.
Okay, you broke up a little bit as you were talking, so I didn't get everything you said, everything you asked. But the point that I was making when I asked you to describe the Greek concept of logos, the point that I was making is that in the concept of the logos, there is an externality to the logos, that this is the word coming from outside of God almost as commandment, rather than the approach of Patanjali and Bhartrihari, which is that the word is self-existent within the human consciousness, that this does not represent an externality, a command, information, a package delivered to the human being from outside. That is the main distinction that I was making.
I see now. So I understand then that rather than being external, it's internal. Or am I being necessarily dualistic? But to say that we become, each of us, the source of that word that is emerging into the world and making the world moment by moment.
Yes, I believe. Can you say once more? You're breaking up, and I'm having trouble hearing you exactly. But I think what you're saying is important. So could you please say that once more?
Well, rather than the word being something external to God and external to ourselves as a kind of container for meaning, we have our living being and the very world itself coming into being, and everyone speaks the word into existence. It's an inside job.
Yeah. Okay. I think that really you hit it with the difference of the dualism and the non-dualism here. In my comprehension of Bhartrihari and Patanjali, I see them as non-dualists, and this is what is especially significant for me. You know, I described before a somewhat later, somewhat tantric a view of the universe through speech, where we have Shiva and we have Shiva with the desire to know himself, to objectify himself, looking in the mirror and perceiving Shakti. And then Shakti further goes on and manifests still undifferentiated through you have Shiva, Shakti, Sadashiva, Ishvara, Shuddha Vidya. Now these are the five sort of cosmic elements that we'll discover later on in Tantra. And then what happens is that we have the introduction now of Maya. And Maya is this this measurement, is this differentiation in which bliss, Ananda Shakti, becomes emotion, where omniscience becomes the knowledge of things, and all the cosmic, eternal, undifferentiated aspects, all the potentials, become differentiated. And what causes this to happen, of course, is the introduction of time or sequencing. So when we speak about individual consciousness, which is what we're doing, it's not really my purpose here to speculate about cosmic entities, but rather focus in on the human consciousness that we're dealing with. So in terms of the individual consciousness, we see it as a reflection of the cosmic consciousness, however, subject to differentiation created by time and sequencing. So the question of externality, of the word arriving from an external source, even a divine source, is not really the issue here, as we're speaking of only one thing. We're speaking of the individual as reflections of the divine or the cosmic, but more important, that the actual reality of the individuals is what we're calling into question. We may use language and speech as that means to question the individual. And we use the process, if we examine the process of speech, of how we end up as human beings with cognition, and why that cognition is specific and why it's varied, then according to the yoga of Patanjali, and indeed the yoga of Bhartrihari, we can basically move backwards in that scheme from the point of believing, assigning a reality to our perceptions and thoughts, to understanding that these are caused by ignorance. And as we move backwards in this process, we can arrive at that source of our cognition, which Bhartrihari and, in fact, the moderns such as Chomsky firmly lays at the feet of speech. So this is the real significance in making the distinction between the externality of the logos and the internality of the Shabda Brahman, as it's spoken about by Bhartrihari, that we're going inside to find what manifests the outside, and to understand why we are caught up in an illusion of our own creation. Now, grammar, because this is the area that we're talking about. Grammar, of course, to Patanjali and Bhartrihari, goes far beyond the proper conventional use of words and their structure and their meaning. For Bhartrihari and Patanjali, what we see is that by the means of grammar, by the means of determining structures of expression and articulation, and what lies behind those structures, and the meaning that is joined with those structures, that we do a lot more than just speak properly in a conventional sense, but this is the very key to both knowledge and to liberation. Bhartrihari is very specific about this. Let me see, I have a quote here. In the Vakyapadiya, in the first section, he says, grammar is the gateway to liberation, the remedy for all blemishes or impurities of speech, the purifier of all disciplines and sciences, and shines in every branch of knowledge. He goes on in great detail how speech is the very basis for all human cognition. And this is what is interesting for us. So, in the last session that we had, we started speaking about spota. And this is, as I explained in the last session, spota is not a word that originates with Bhartrihari, that it was used by Patanjali in several instances, and Panini also used the word, even if the use was a little bit different than what Bhartrihari is implying. So spota is more than meaning. Meaning, we can, very often the Sanskrit word artha is used for meaning. But this kind of artha, general meaning, can be found in a number of ways. It can be found through inference, through deduction, through various logical processes, through the voice of authority, and so forth. But spota is different in the sense that it is something that takes place without time involved. This is a spontaneous, intuitive flash. What has been described in these classes as the aha moment. So it is not something that is deductively arrived at or inferred, but it is grasped, it is perceived. And here's the difference, that spota is perceived by both the hearer as well as the speaker. Spota is not the sound. but the sound carries the spota, or at least carries indications of where the spota can be found. So the speaker is articulating. He is forming his articulation in what Bhartrihari calls the Madhyama, the Madhyama Dhwani. In other words, the way that the articulation will be uttered, but without the vocalization yet. It's the creation of the articulation in the mind. It's referred to also as the Prakrit Dhwani. So the speaker is manifesting this this meaning that he has, that this thing that he is compelled to communicate. The spota is the meaning is taking the form of phonemes, of syllables, of words, and they're going into a sentence which carries the basic, which carries the meaning itself. But now he actually speaks it, he actually articulates it, he utters it. What happens in the utterance is that these sort of perfect syllables that we've described in the past and explored in the past are no longer these perfect syllables in the actual utterance. A perfect syllable may be the syllable a, but when somebody is articulating it, depending on his or her accent, his or her linguistic background, the fact of having teeth or no teeth, the fact of having a mouthful of food or pan or something, or an empty mouth, or 1,000 other reasons, can distorts this perfect syllable, this perfect articulation. We learned, we studied how we make these articulations, but the articulations don't always come out like that. So here we get this sound that is the dhwani, the Vikrita dhwani, the articulated, the uttered sound of the sentence, or what the speaker is trying to convey. And the hearer hears these sounds, which are no longer the exact phonemes and the exact words. The words can be altered as well. But he goes through a mental process where he corrects the mistakes that he is perceiving in the speech, mistakes being things like accents or mispronunciation, mouthful of food, and so forth. He goes through a process of correcting this into what he perceives as the proper syllables and the proper words. And from that, he perceives a spota. He gets an immediate flash of meaning. If I say the word to you, if I say the word dog, in any kind of accent, I say dwog, I say dag. So there's so many ways that you hear the word dog, you make the adjustment in your Madhyama speech, and immediately you obtain this flash of what I'm talking about. Now, of course, this is much easier when there is a very universal and identifiable substance or dravya that we're referring to. Dog or cow or table or things like that. If I start using words like enlightenment or democracy or love, of course, that this is a whole other issue, considerably more difficult and considerably more complicated. But what we can see from this example is that the speaker is finding the spota. The spota arrives spontaneously in his mind as he feels compelled to share this, to communicate this. His utterance is imperfect, yet that doesn't matter, unless it's too imperfect, of course. But it basically doesn't matter, as the hearer will readjust that in his Madhyama speech, and he will perceive a meaning from that. The meaning, whether the meaning is what the speaker had intended, is another issue. But it's the same issue. Do we really see what we perceive? When we walk into the dark room and we jump back because we think there's a snake there, but when the light is turned on, we see that it's only a coiled rope, then our perception is modified and made clearer. And in fact, we do the same thing in dealing with perceiving meaning in our speech, that there is a consistent, progressive movement towards understanding with more clarity. There is a movement through the sequence of the sentence from the speaker, that we start anticipating the spota from the first sounds out of the speaker's mouth, but it's only when the speaker gets to the full stop, the period at the end of the sentence, that we're capable of perceiving the meaning of the speaker. So that sentence, as I discussed in our last session, becomes the meaning bearer, the irreducible unit of speech that contains within it meaning. We discussed in the last session how, yes, there are words, there are phonemes, there are grammatical structures, but they are abstracted from the meaning of the meaning unit, which is the sentence. So they only really have meaning in terms of the whole. If you abstract and extract a word from that sentence, then that word can be used in a number of different ways and in a number of different contexts. And it's not just the sentence which gives us the ability to understand that word. There's much more than that. There is a whole history within our lifetime of words and meanings and and refinement of meanings, of perceptions, and these perceptions are due to so many different factors. First of all, there's a very general factor that Bhartrihari would attribute to past lives, as would Patanjali. And these are referred to as sanskaras. These are impressions that the baby is actually born with that gives rise to the possibility, in the first place, of speech, that gives rise to the possibility that there is a text. Chomsky today would refer to that more as an innate human structure in the DNA or in the nervous system that does the same thing. It provides the newborn child with the ability to learn languages, and not just the ability, but the compulsion to learn languages and to articulate, speak, and communicate. This is very much a compulsion. So, according to our perceptions and how our perceptions are determined by our habits resulting from this life and previous lives, from our cultural conditioning, from the evidence given to us from authority, what we consider authority, which may be different for different people. These perceptions and the way that we organize these perceptions in our mental faculty determines our knowledge and the way that we deal with our lives and the world. So this is why the grammarians are always making this point about liberation, that the means of liberation is through the removal of ignorance, which takes place through our speech. Now, to go back to how we started this evening with Kailash's comment and question about logos, we have a very interesting figure in both Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and throughout Bhartrihari. It's the figure of Ishvara. Now, this is a word that if you look it up in the dictionary, or if you go by how it's used in modern standard colloquial Hindi, Ishwar means God. But this is not how the grammarians, Patanjali and Bhartrihari, are using this name. As I said, what really creates the possibility of differentiation and humanness as opposed to strictly divinity, is sequencing, is time. And there is an imaginary level, line that we can draw. Imaginary, not real. Imaginary line. Above which we can say nothing is differentiated. And below which there is a process of differentiation which ultimately creates the entire manifestation that we perceive. We can say that the entire manifestation is like a text. I'll call it a text. In fact, in my book, Autobiography of a Sadhu, I referred to it as the book of the world. The sum total of the expression of the world. And that sum total of expression and word and meaning is subject, obviously, to this sequencing, to this time. That's what makes it this grand text, book of the world. But in the absence of sequencing, in the absence of time, this text exists in potential. You cannot have something exist that didn't, where there didn't exist the potential for it to manifest. So we have the book of the world that exists in potential. It exists as almost a divine pregnancy, the pregnant aspect of Brahman. But in the case of Bhartrihari and Patanjali, they personify this as Ishvara. And Ishvara is known by the syllable Om. How do we meditate according to Patanjali? How do we perform japa according to the Vedas? How do we do pranayam according to the Brahmanas and Upanishads? It's by the focus on this syllable, Om, which is how Ishvara is known. Why Om? What do we know about this vowel, O, from previous sessions? Can anybody tell me? Where does O come from? How do we make O? I hope you remember. O is made from the syllable A plus the syllable U. And if you'll say A plus U together as one unit, it becomes O. A, U, O. A, as we have the syllable, the akshar A, as we've discussed a number of times, is the syllable of Shiva, but the syllable of undifferentiated consciousness. U, which is articulated at the lips, which is connected with manifestation, is knowledge. So who Ishvara is he is Shiva, but Shiva in the form of the book of the world in potential. It is from Ishwar that comes the Shabda Praman, that comes the actual texts of mankind, the Shastras, which in India might be referred to as the Shruti, the Vedas, and the Smriti, all the other various Shastras, the scriptural texts. Not scriptural texts in the sense of ideologies, of instruction or explanations. This is the book of the world manifested in text through the grace of Ishvara. So on the cosmic level, who Ishvara is, on the human level, this is the Rishi, this is the wise man or woman, the enlightened soul. This is the guru. This is the yogi. So it's through the grace of Ishvara, and this is why Patanjali recommends that one does a sadhana oriented towards Ishvara, focusing on this Om, that the spota, which remember with Ishvara, is completely in potential. It exists as spota. It exists as light. This is how we know this is the analog of light or enlightenment, is coming from this spota, this understanding, but understanding when it is still undifferentiated. So when we come down to the human level, where now we have differentiation, we've gone through the antakarana, the syllables yara, la, wa, right, which describe the mental processes of the human being as differentiation is increased, meaning that we start out with this nature of man that we might call Purush, the equivalent of Shiva, and then this consciousness, this wants to know itself, so it objectifies itself as Prakriti. And now this objectification of consciousness, of individual consciousness, now must go into this intellectual, into this mental kind of world, where knowledge becomes specific rather than omniscience. Then this knowledge, this specific knowledge of perception of the world and organizing of the perception of the world must seem to be individual. It's me, I, who is experiencing this. It's me that is having this perception, the ahamkar, which is necessary in this continuum of differentiation and individuation. And then we get to the functioning mind, which already is individuated. So here is this process of how the Spota at one point being a sort of a way of looking at the meaning of the entire universe, gets individuated and differentiated into the flashes of meaning that take place in the human being. Now let's have some questions, because I can't believe that you followed me through that.
Babaji?
Yeah.
I have the feeling that you were walking us through the syllables a, u, and that compose aum.
Right.
And I got that a is the undifferentiated, that u is knowledge becoming specific. Is the sound then the last thing that you alluded to, the coming together?
I'm sorry?
Or I may have misunderstood that part.
The coming together.
Perhaps you could explain the final, the sound in aum.
Yes. Well, you can think of the final nasal, the I try not to call it the M.
I resisted the temptation too.
This is the full stop. This is the thing that we're waiting for when the sequence of the sentence is taking place. We're waiting for that full stop for the, at the sentence, so we can know what the guy was talking about. Curiously enough, we use the dot at the end of the sentence when we write in the modern world, or much of the modern world. And it's the same dot called the bindu that's used in giving this sense of completion to a syllable in Indian grammar and tantra.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
Babaji,
just to
may I
go
ask one more
back and yes, please.
You said that on the everyday earthly level, Ishvara is the guru. You listed some other roles or offices, so to speak, but are you communicating that in order to, well, that's the oral tradition, that's the point at which we access on a relational level the continuity of wisdom from the ancients?
Yeah, that's fair to say. That's fair to say, yes. But you see, there's more to it than that. Because the Bhartrihari's Vritti, his own commentary on Vakyapadiyya, interesting he uses this word Vritti. Vritti will come up again and again and again. He makes it clear that the corrupt forms of Vak are a sin, and that all speech is not sacred. And in fact, the real the confusion that we have in our lives and in our societies and in the world is based on the corrupt use of Vak. Chomsky basically blames the powers that be, the mass media, the corporate entities, the various governments of the world, and so forth. He blames them for hiding the truth with the mask of language. So this is much more than an issue of speaking properly and speaking clearly and making yourself known. It's even more than the means of knowing ourselves, that ultimately this has a display, a manifestation in the affairs of the world itself. That when Vak is purified, as it were, it creates prosperity. And when Vak is corrupted, it creates the opposite. So we cannot expect normally, unless we get very lucky, that prosperity is going to come from ignorance. More often, prosperity is going to come from knowledge. Now, this is why in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, that he makes this very strong point about truth. Because you see, we can use the structures of grammar, and we could use the etymologies of words to make things, to make articulations and make expressions and make dhvani that represents a very corrupt form of Vak, that does not make people's lives better, that does not make our lives better, that does not make the world a better place, but in fact increases our suffering on all levels. And so when the ancient Vedic rishis would perform the sacrifice, the yajna, this is one of the exercises involved, was the purification of Vak, of articulation, to where the various means leading towards ignorance, and these are all mental means, of course. Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, as I said several times already, is not a physical body thing. It is a mental thing. It can also almost be thought of as a psychological thing. And the same is true for Bhartrihari. That there are mental processes going on that are all reflected in speech, in the way that we articulate and the way that we hear, which is basically the same process, which create the ignorance. And as we understand these processes, the understanding and the focus on them, as described by Patanjali, the more that we do this, the illusions and the ignorance and the obvious mistakes fall away quickly, and then, of course, for the greater illusions, it takes more time and more effort and more sadhana. But this is ultimately what is interesting to me, coming from these great thinkers, these great grammarians, their approach to understanding understanding ourselves and removing ignorance from ourselves and and creating prosperity for the world. So, a couple things that I should say about Spota.
Babaji?
Yeah.
It sounds like you're saying that sacred speech is truthful speech, honest speech, speech without agenda.
Yes, but that is that's over-reduced and over-generalized, because
Okay.
it's not just what you're talking about is well-intentioned speech. No, we're not talking about good intentions here. What we're talking about is precision. We're talking about a, a progressive. Okay, if we go back to the cosmos.
Where do you go?
Babaji, I don't know if you can hear us, but you've left the call. Can someone send him a text message? I can't on my phone.
Let's wait. He may be able to sign back in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Peter, can you call him? I don't have his phone number handy. Oh, looks like he's back.
Babaji, can you hear us?
If I touch what looks like a black square, it says it's Baba Rampuri, and then the mic is canceled out.
On mine, I show him as not having a canceled mic, to use your label, but I'm not hearing anything from him. This is Kailash. Well, I sent Babaji an email and a chat turn in each of the two chat windows.
Thanks, Kailash. Can you hear me, Kailash?
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
On an aside, Peter, I can say that I'm enjoying your book. I bought the Singer's Die twice, and I'm enjoying it. One thought that I was having that maybe I can ask you about and sort of relates to all of this, Peter, is you bring up the Kali Yuga and that the world is created and disappears many times. And I guess some people were thinking that maybe imminently the world would end because of some of the wars that were going on at the time. And I was thinking about that. And then also Baba Rampuri's speech, probably a lot of you heard in Basel, where he talks about sort of there's an urgency to speak truthfully, as if the world might end if we don't. And I wonder, you know, do we let the world end? Are we trying to fight that? And I think there's a cultural bias on my part from Christianity, which is a sort of try to save the world sort of thing, and then also even comic strips of Superman. But I guess sometimes I wonder if it's all illusion, and if it's all going to stop, why are we trying? What's the importance of this? I don't know. Could you hear me, Peter?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Peter writes that he... Go ahead.
You hear me? No.
Yes, I hear you. I had just turned off my mic, so I'll turn it off again.
Jennifer?
Yes.
I cannot, I have a problem with my mic because there's too much wind on the beach. I'm sitting at the beach in Spain. And so it might become a disturbance.
Yeah.
But never mind about the end of the world.
Okay.
It's actually not bad at all. I'm not hearing wind at all, and your voice is coming through loud and clear.
Okay. Yep. Sometimes there is.
So now you have to answer Jennifer's question.
What was the question, Jennifer?
My question really was, I guess, why does it all matter? Why are we trying so hard? And is there an urgency?
No, look, Jennifer, don't ask me this. This is a question you have to answer yourself. If it is important or not, I cannot tell you. Yeah. But you came from the, that people say, well, the end of the world, in that respect, it has already passed for the last, I don't know how many years. It was like the end of the world was supposed to be 76 or so. So you and I, at least, we survived the end of the world.
All right. I feel like I have the compulsion that Babaji talks about, some kind of compulsion, but I can't quite, with speech or knowledge, you're trying to assemble it somewhere, but I can't say more about it except that it just feels compulsive, but it's not coming easily, the understanding. Yeah.
I think maybe the compulsion is that you have to speak. You know, if you stop to speak, you will feel very lonesome after some time. Probably. You know, there isn't that, but maybe I don't know.
That's an interesting thought. Certainly, speaking authentically helps me feel like I'm really here, and then also allows for connection that otherwise wouldn't be there.
Those sound like really good reasons to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and the importance of a syllable is still very abstract to me. I try to understand why the syllable has to be right, and I'm not sure I get that yet.